Here we go. Okay, we are on Daf Yud Aleph, Amud Aleph, or 11a3. The Gemara was telling us this idea. Let's start again one line back. Hu Achashverosh. It says in the beginning of the Megillah, Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh. It was in the days of Achashverosh, and then it repeats. Hu Achashverosh. Again, Achashverosh, he's Achashverosh. Almost like it's trying to tell you something with that extra word, with those two extra words, that he is Achashverosh. And the Gemara explains, he, the same Achashverosh that he was in the beginning, that he was a Rasha, in the end he was also a Rasha. And we explained that there's two ways of understanding the Gemara over here. The first way of understanding the Gemara is that Achashverosh was a Rasha when he accepted to destroy the Jews, and he was a Rasha in the end of the story, at the end of the story of the Megillah. Where do we find that he was a wicked person at the end of the Megillah? One way of seeing that is that even though he was good to the Jews, afterwards, that wasn't because he was a righteous person, it was because of what he saw happened to Haman. So he was protecting himself, he wasn't protecting the Jews. But where do we see that he was a Rasha? In the end, that even at the end, even at the end, he raised the taxes, like we saw in the last Gemara. However, there's another way of understanding the Gemara, is that, what does it mean from the beginning till the end? The end is what he did with Haman. The beginning is where he got in the way when the Jewish people were trying to build the Beit HaMikdash in the first place. So they'd been given permission. Achashverosh figured out a way of sabotaging that. So there was a beginning and an end to his wickedness.
Wait,
okay.
I don't remember that. You said
And I said there's another way of explaining it, that when in the beginning of Achashverosh's rule, the Jewish people had the opportunity to be able to build the Beit HaMikdash.
the first or the second?
The second Beit
The
HaMikdash.
second, because the first was already destroyed.
That's
He
way
already
before,
Had,
yes.
He already had all
But his brother.
the artifacts.
Yes, correct, exactly. All right.
Nebuchadnezzar was his brother.
Nebuchadnezzar was called his brother because they were similar in their characteristics in trying to destroy,
Come on.
trying to get into destroying or preventing the Beit HaMikdash from being built. Now the Gemara continues and says, let's carry on this thread. Hu Esav, the pasuk says about Esav, Hu Esav, he's Esav, Hu berish'o mitchilato ve'ad sofo. Esav also was a Rasha from the beginning until the end. What does it mean he's a Rasha in the beginning? It tells us that when he was a young man, what does he do? He sells the Bechorah. We see later on that he tries to attack Yaakov with the 400 men. We see later on at the end of his story that when Yaakov is coming to be buried, Esav tries to get in the way. By the way, that's how Esav loses his head. That's how he dies. There's one of the grandsons of Yaakov, his name is Chushim ben Dan, okay? Chushim, the son of Dan, he was deaf. He didn't understand what's going on. Esav was like trying to make a do and say, listen, I'm the eldest son, I deserve the extra spot in the Ma'arat HaMachpelah, in Hebron, with all the Avot. So Yaakov's body is being transported in the middle of the funeral. Esav's acting up. Anyway, they're arguing with him, you sold it, you didn't sell it. This guy sees this Rasha getting in the way of his grandfather being buried. He walks up, clobbers him across the head, knocks his head off. Yeah.
Wow.
What's wild is that he is deaf, and his name is Chushim, which means senses.
How ironic.
Isn't that ironic? So someone once asked, why would he be called senses if he was deaf? And the answer is because the irony is, in that moment, when everyone should have responded to the fact that Esav was being a Rasha, getting in the way of the kavod of the tzaddik, they should have been responding. It seems that the only one that could actually hear was the one that couldn't hear at all. That's why they call him Chushim ben Dan. Beautiful. Let's continue. Hu Esav, he was Esav from the beginning until the end. Hu Datan va'Aviram, same line that we find with Datan Aviram. Where do we find Datan Aviram were Rasha in the beginning and in the end? In the beginning, in the story of they're hitting each other, Moshe Rabbeinu sees them hitting one another. He calls them, he says, Rasha lama takere'echa, why are you hitting your friend? And in the end, we find as well that the last mistake that they make in their life is joining the rebellion of Korach against Moshe Rabbeinu. However, there were many other things that they do. What?
Weren't Datan and Aviram good in the middle? We learned that they were the ones who didn't hit. They took the hitting for the Jews in the middle.
That is before the beginning. The first time.
Oh, that was before.
Yeah.
So they didn't start that bad then.
So that means that they were taking the abuse on behalf of the Jewish people, right? At that moment, that's the first moment we see them being Rishaim, is when they are hitting each other, okay? And then we look later on and we find it. So The one question is that really Jonah is asking, is a good question, is why would they be called Rishayim in the beginning? What he's referring to is that we know that Datan and Aviram, they were taskmasters in Egypt. And one of the things that they would do is when the Jewish people were supposed to be getting a beating, what would Datan and Aviram do? They would step in and take the beating. That sounds like a tzaddik. So why does it say that they're Rasha from the beginning until the end? Sorry? So the simple answer is from when they start being evil. But maybe Jonah is asking, it sounds like they're Rasha mitchila from the beginning till the end. It doesn't sound from the beginning of the time that they were Rasha.
Sounds
So
like
there's-
forever.
Forever. So there's another way of looking at it, and that's as follows. If I take a beating for you, that makes me a tzaddik. But if I'm also willing to beat, you know what that means? That means I'm a boxer. I'm a UFC fighter. I could take a punch. I also give a punch. The minute they were hitting one another, they were hitting another Jew, the fact that they saved another Jew from being hit and took the beating just means that they're a tough guy. You understand? So the day that we see that they were hitting one another, where Moshe Rabbeinu said, Rasha lama takereecha, we retranslated the fact that they were willing to get hit instead of the Jew as just being the type of guy that it doesn't bother him so much. He could take a beating. Okay? Let's carry on. Says the Gemara, Who Hamelech Achaz. He was the king Achaz. Achaz also was b'rish'ato mitchilato ve'ad sofo. What does the pasuk say over there? That God punished Achaz. And when God punished Achaz, it says, and even when Hashem punished Achaz, Achaz continued in his evil ways. What does that tell you? That when he now continued in his evil ways in the end of his life, he was continuing a way of life that he was practicing beforehand, which was also evil. So he was evil from the beginning till the end. Now the Gemara goes conversely and says the opposite. Avraham, who Avraham? He is Avraham. Says the Gemara, who b'tzidko mitchilato v'ad sofo. He's the same tzaddik that he was in the beginning until he was in the end. What's the tzidkut of Avraham from the beginning till the end? Many different ways of understanding this. Okay? The idea of Avraham being a tzaddik from the beginning. One way, the simplest way of understanding it is Avraham Avinu finds God by himself as a young man, as a young boy, okay? Risks his life with Nimrod to be thrown into the Kivshan Ha'esh. Goes through his entire life with test after test after test. And at every phase, Avraham shows his tzidkut, his righteousness. However, how do we know that was till the end of his life? Because the pasuk says that God said, I know leman asher tzaved banav beto aharav, that he's going to command his children to follow in his ways after he passes away, indicating that Hashem was saying in his ways after he passes away, meaning that his ways until he passed away were the ways of a true tzaddik. I have another proof for that. Anyone could guess the other proof?
Another proof that what?
That Abraham is tzaddik all the way till the end, to the last breath?
Not the...
When does Abraham die? How old is he when he dies?
900.
No, not even close. Closer. Close. Very close. 175. He's supposed to live to 180. He loses 5 years of his life. Why? Because Esav, at that point, goes off and becomes a lifetime criminal. And in fact, when is the day that Esav does all the sins that he does?
The day of the funeral.
Exactly. He comes to the funeral. That's when the sale happens.
Right.
He's exhausted. He's raped. He's killed. He's stolen. He's done all the big sins that he could do in one day. He comes. He's literally physically exhausted. He tells Yaakov he has no strength left. He says, pour it in my mouth. I don't even.
The same day Abraham died?
The lentil soup was the lentils that we serve at the Avelut.
Wow.
Why does it? It doesn't just happen to be that he does all these Averot on the day Abraham dies. Hashem makes sure that Abraham never sees. He dies thinking that his children and grandchildren are still on the righteous path.
Wow.
Right?
Off the death.
Yeah, and he from then on, off the D, like they say. Okay? So, the point over here, my friends, is my proof to that is if Abraham had corrupted his ways towards the end of his life, how long would he have lived for? 180. It's only that he's a tzaddik, that God says he couldn't bear to see that Esav would not be in the right path, that he actually loses those 5 years. So from the fact that he's 175, you see b'tzidkato that he stands in his tzid, in his righteousness from the beginning till the end. Says the Gemara continues, Hu Aharon and Moshe. Aharon and Moshe hen b'tzidkan mitchilatan v'atzofan. They in their righteousness from their beginnings until their end. What does it mean until their end? The pasuk tells us that Aharon and Moshe, why did they die? Look at the pasuk. You'll see it over here. Kaf chet at the bottom. Oh, it doesn't bring the next pasuk. But the pasuk over there says, this is Aaron and Moshe, and they die. Why did they die? Because of the sin of Megilla, of the waters, when he hit the rock. The Chachamim explained, the pasuk is telling you that there was only one possible reason why they should have died. There was no other sin in the hand of Moshe and Aaron other than that one. So you see that Moshe Rabbeinu, who were the righteous leaders of Am Yisrael from way back when, are now continuing in their ways until the very end.
Why are they saying Aharon was guilty of that sin?
Excellent question. The simple answer to that is that the Gemara learns that a person has, the pasuk says, Ocheach tocheach amitecha, which means rebuke, you shall rebuke your friend. Says the Gemara, afilu talmid et rabo. Even a student has an obligation to rebuke his teacher when it comes to a mitzvah or when it comes to a avera. Ocheach tocheach, says it twice. One of the things we learn is that that's how we know Aharon, who stood by and watched what Moshe Rabbeinu had done, Aharon himself also was now caught up in the avon because he didn't tell him, you shouldn't have done that, don't hit it, you should speak to it. How come we don't say it the other way around? That when Aharon sinned with the golden calf, Moshe should have said something to him.
He wasn't there.
Excellent, he wasn't there. He was there, he didn't know the details. He didn't know the pressure.
Okay, but now Moshe, this was hitting the rock was the only bad thing that he did, correct?
Correct.
Aaron did 2 bad things. Then.
So that's what the pasuk.
Why are they in a package deal?
So that's what the pasuk is saying, that Aharon received kapara for his avon. So there was no other sin when they passed away other than the sin of Megilla. Megilla they had not managed to get atonement for, but Chet HaEgel he managed to get atonement for. Aaron's part in the game. Aaron's sin in the game of the Chet HaEgel is minuscule. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't do anything.
Build the calf?
He didn't build the calf. He was trying to delay the people. So he said to them, "Oh, go out and let's do a fundraising campaign." Right? Imagine someone's like, Rabbi, we want to do mixed dancing, the ballroom over here. I say, sure, let's do a fundraising. Let's do a charity account. You don't think it's going to happen. Remember, how short is Moshe from coming back? 6 hours. So Aaron's like, by the time they even get the gold together.
Right.
So what happens? They go out, they get the gold in no time. Because it's only for mitzvot that people don't give money.
Question, what about shattering the luchot?
Sorry?
What about Moshe?
Shattering the luchot was considered a mitzvah. It says in the Gemara Shabbat that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he broke the luchot, Hashem said to Moshe, "Yasher kochacha asher shibarta." Yani God gave him a hazak baruch that he broke them. Why? It's a different thing we'll discuss when we learn Shabbat. Okay? Let's go. Says the Gemara, David hu hakatan. David was the youngest. Says the Gemara, it's not just telling you that he's the youngest of the brothers, we already knew that, but rather it's telling us that he embodied the concept of katan, of the small one. Hu bekatnuto, he maintained his smallness, mitchilato ad sofo, until the end. Kishem shebekatnuto et tinatzmo, just like when he was younger, he humbled himself etzel mishi gadol mimeno b'Torah, in front of someone that was greater than him in Torah. Kach b'malchuto, also in his kingdom, when he was a king. Hiktin atzmo etzel mishi gadol mimeno chokhmah. He also made himself small in front of the one that was wiser than him in chokhmah. Who is the person that's wiser than him? Sorry? Milamed Ezu Chacham Halomed Mikol Adam. Yes. So David HaMelech, when he's young, he learns from Achitophel. Okay? When he's old, how do you know that when he's a king, he humbles himself? Where do we see that? So that we see actually by Natan HaNavi. That when the story of Bathsheba, so Natan HaNavi came to him, and Natan HaNavi said, I have to tell you this terrible case. I need you to rule on it. So what's the case? He says, this poor guy, He only had one sheep, lives next door to this rich guy. Rich guy has tons of sheep. Hey, the rich guy came, he slaughtered the poor guy's sheep, made himself dinner, and he ate his sheep. David HaMelech's fuming. What a guy, he has everything, he has to go take this, He says the guy has to die. What he did, he took the guy's food, took his akel, has to die. Natan Avi says to David HaMelech, the person in the story is you. You're the king. You're allowed to marry so many wives. You have wives. And you went to this guy as one wife, Bathsheba, and you figured out a way that you should marry her. You're the guy in the story. David HaMelech immediately says, Chatati, I sinned. With Shaul, what happens? When Shemuel calls him out about Amalek, what does Shaul say? No, the people, we brought it, we didn't mean, come with me, David HaMelech's instant response is Chatati. So you see that David HaMelech, when he saw that someone was greater than him in Chokhmah, the fact that he was the king, he didn't allow that to get in the way and say, were you speaking to the king like that? Off with your head. Right? He's maktin at that small, and that's why it says, Hu HaKatan. Now, I just want to point out, it seems a little bit like, convenient, that every time it comes to a Rasha, it says, Hu Datan Aviram. We're like, yeah, he's a Rasha the whole time. Hu Haman, Hu Achashverosh. He was a Rasha in the beginning, Rasha in the end. When it comes to Abraham, we're like, Hu Abraham. Not he's a Rasha. Now we learn that it means he's a tzaddik.
Yeah, so why are we doing all this?
Why are we doing that? You know what the answer is? We're explaining is the idea that someone is themselves indicates that there's consistency in the person in who he was. A guy who was a Rasha in the beginning, consistency would translate as a Rasha in the end. A guy who's a tzaddik in the beginning, what would consistency translate as? So let's say, as an example, you're meeting some guy and you're like, who has this? Rabbi Fahi is the rabbi in Safra now. Yeah? And you say, he's the same Rabbi Fahi. Is that Lashon Hara or Lashon HaTov?
HaTov.
Depends.
Right. Yeah.
Was I a Muppet before? Was I a Muppet before? If I was a horrible guy before, same Rabbi Fahi is Lashon Hara. The guy didn't change. Still a Rasha, same horrible guy as he was before. Didn't improve one jot. How about if the guy was what's it called? Was a Sadiq before. What are you saying? Oh, he didn't let it go to his head. So when you say it's the same, that's really what it's saying here. Hu Achashverosh. The same Achashverosh. So whatever he was before, it indicates that is what he is later. So if we can establish on either side of the parameters who the person was, we're good to go. Avi, I did not even recognize who you were. Talk about shaving and rubbing it in the Sephardic guys' faces, because you could do it on Lag BaOmer. I love you, man. Okay, let's carry on. The Megillah continues. The Gemara Megillah continues. Hamolech behodu ve'ad kusheva ve'esrimu me'a medina. Hamolech means that he ruled. Amarav, what does it mean? That he ruled Hammolech, right? Amarav, Rav says Shemalach me'atzmo. He decided that he himself was the king. He anointed himself. Hammolech. He became the king, Yani. Why? Because he was not the royal descendant. What did we say already? He was the husband of what today where they would call the queen's consort.
King consort.
Right? Over here, right? No, queen's consort.
He's the king consort.
No, in this case, the opposite.
No, it's the queen consort.
Queen's consort
Camilla.
means, last time around...
Camilla, queen consort.
No, I don't think so. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Queen, no, it's different than queens.
They called her the queen
she's the
consort.
Right,
and then
the
she
queen.
says, I don't want that, I want to be the queen.
Right, so the queen consort is different than the queen's consort. I'm using an apostrophe
I
S.
understand.
Okay, sorry, Megillah. All right, let's go. Carry on. So in either case, he was royal because he was married to Vashti. That's why it says Hammolech, not Hamelech. Okay? Amri la lishvach. Some say it in a positive way, and some say it in a negative way. Amri la, some people say the shvach lo have inish techashid lemalka kavate. Some people say, right, that you know what? He was not royal blood. But we say he was the king, we mean it in a positive way. Meaning, even though he wasn't royal blood, there was no one as worthy as him for the throne. So therefore, he became the king. Okay?
She was royal blood?
She was.
Royal blood queen.
Royal blood queen marries stable boy.
Isn't the fact that he killed her even more intense of a fact, given that she was royalty and he wasn't?
We're going to come to that soon. What's going on with that whole the killing. How does he kill her? Okay, we'll go through that in a bit.
Green, right? Or Esther was green?
Esther was
Esther
green.
was
Esther was green.
green.
Esther was green.
Rashi was 10.
The Amri la lignai. They were both gorgeous. That's what we know. Achashverosh was a lucky man because they were both beautiful. Everyone wanted both of his wives.
Their own ways.
What?
What do we call it? Esther,
lizard.
green lizard.
Yeah, but there's still something was very alluring about her. We don't know exactly what, but yeah, let's carry on. V'amri la lignai. And some people say it as a negative thing. De lo have chazi lemalchuta. Right? They say it the other way, that he really was not Ra'ui to be the king. Umamona yiterahu diyahe v'kam. But he he used the war chest. He spent a tremendous amount of money and he bought the kingdom. Okay? So some people say, like, he wasn't a royal, and they mean it in the best possible way. The guy wasn't a royal and he still was the king. And the other, because he was the best guy for the job. The other way of looking at it is no, the guy didn't deserve the job at all. That's what we mean when we say he wasn't a royal. But the guy paid his way in to be able to become the king of Paras. Carry on. Mehodu ve'ad Kush, he was the king Hamolech, Mehodu, from Hodu until Kush. Rav and Shmuel argue as to what this pasuk is telling us. Chad amar Hodu besof ha'olam, v'Kush besof ha'olam. One of them says, Hodu is one side of the earth, Kush all the way on the other side. So what's the pasuk telling you? That he ruled over the whole world. Chad amar Hodu v'Kush, Hodu and Kush, not Hodu until Kush, yani they're so far apart, but rather Hodu and Kush, Gabe Hadadi Havukaimi. They're two countries that sit right next to each other. Kishem shemalach al Hodu v'Kush, just as he ruled on Hodu and Kush, kach malach misof ha'olam v'ad sofo. So too did he rule on the entire earth from one side to the other. So it's interesting. The first opinion says Hodu and Kush geographically, where were they? They were very far apart. So we're using the term Hodu v'ad Kush. What does it describe?
The whole world.
The width of his kingdom. The other opinion says, no, he ruled from Hodu to Kush, like Long Branch and Deal. What are we saying? He ruled the whole world with the intensity, with the control that someone could have over such a small space. He exercised that level of control over the whole world. So when the pasuk is telling you that he ruled Mehodu ve'ad Kush, it's not a big deal. Again, remember.
So you're saying that geographically it's non-existent. It's just a phrase.
No. One more time. The pasuk continues and tells us, right? How many countries was it? Mehodu ve'ad Kush sheva ve'esrim u'me'a medina. We know he ruled over 127 countries. One opinion is that there's 125 countries between Hodu and Kush. They're on opposite sides of the spectrum. So it describes the width of his power, okay? How much land he conquered. The other opinion is saying, Hodu ve'ad Kush, 127 countries. They were the two middle countries in the 127. One right next to the other. What are we describing when we use Hodu and Kush? Not the breadth of his kingdom, but the control that he exercised over the whole of his empire was like as if he was ruling over a tiny fiefdom. Okay? Clear? So the description is not over width, but over power. Carrying on. Ki yotze badavar ata omer. Just like you find, ki hu rodeh b'chol ever nahar mitifsach ve'ad Aza. The pasuk says when it comes to Shlomo HaMelech that Shlomo ruled from Tifsach until Aza, right, over the whole side of the river. Rav Shmuel, same machloket. Chad amar Tifsach b'sof ha'olam ve'Aza b'sof ha'olam. One of them says Tifsach is one side of the world, Aza on the other. So it's describing all the place that Shlomo HaMelech had ruling over. They were right next to each other. Just as he ruled over these two with ease, because they were so jointly connected and convenient to have a presence and a power over. So too did he rule over the entire world with that level of input and absolute control. Sheva ve'esrim u'me'a medina, 127 countries. Amar Rav Chizda says, Batichila malach al sheva, u'basof malach al esrim, u'lebasof malach al me'a. He did not rule over 127 countries. What did he rule over? First, 7 countries. Then he expanded his kingdom to 20. Then he expanded his kingdom to 100. Now, why would you say that? Why would Rav Chizda say that?
Because it's all separated. 100.
But separated by what?
Huh?
Separated by what?
The Vav.
Excellent. Separated by Vav. How would you say it if you want to say 127? Mea esrim v'sheva. It says Sheva ve'esrim u'mea. 7 and 20 and 100. So Rav Chizda actually is very logical now.
I feel like we see that somewhere else in the Torah.
Nailed it. Where? Sarai Imenu. It says that she lived, right? A 7 and 20 and 100. And the Gemara actually says that we learned something about it. We're going to come across what Rabbi Akiva used to say about this derasha with Sarai Imenu and the connection. We'll come back to that. Ela me'ata. One second. If that's what you're trying to say, when the pasuk says Ushne chaye Amram lived 7, Sheva, Ushloshim, Umea Shana, 7 and 30 and 100. My dashat be. How are you going to explain that? Could you say that he lived 7 years and then he lived 30 years and then he lived 100 years? Right? You wouldn't. That doesn't make sense. The Gemara says no. Shani hacha. It's different over here. Dekrayi terahu. It's a superfluous. What's it called? It's extra. The pasuk over here. Why? Because you just told me mehodu ve'ad kush kli mehodu ve'ad kush sheva ve'esrim me'amdina. Lama li? Why do I have to tell you sheva ve'esrim me'amdina if I told you he ruled from Africa, top of Africa, till edge of Asia, whatever? You know everything in between. You ruled over however many countries it was. It didn't need to come tell you the number of the countries unless it's trying to tell you no. The dominion of Achashverosh, it happened in stages. 7 and 20 and 100. Okay? So the segmentation is there in order to tell you the sequentiality of his rulership. Tanu Rabbanan. The rabbis explain. Shilosha malchu b'chippah. There are three kings that we find that ruled b'kippah in the... Kippah means like the top of a circle. The whole, like the kippah on my head. Okay? They ruled over the globe. Elohen. These are the three kings. Ahav, ve'achashverosh, u'nevuchadnezzar. 3 kings that ruled over the entire world. So one of them was Ahav, okay? One of them was Achashverosh, and one of them was Nebuchadnezzar. How do we know that this is true, that these 3 kings ruled the world? Achav dichtiv, by Achav it says, Chai Hashem Elokecha. I swear, so to speak. It's an expression of a promise. Chai Hashem Elokecha, im yesh goy u'mamlacha, asher lo shalach Adoni sham nevakshecha. There's no, right? There was no nation, goy, umamlacha, and there's no country that I did not, shalosh anach Adoni, that my master has not sent me to find you. So what it means is that he had the ability to search out each one of those countries. Why? V'lo, if he did not rule over every one of those countries, hechi matzi mishpalu. How could he have made them swear, go search these countries? They wouldn't have been given access to search those countries, to go and find Eliyahu Hanavi. Yeah? Okay, let's carry on. Nebuchadnezzar also, it says, was Malach Bechippah. He ruled the entire world. Dichtiv, v'haya hagoy v'hamamlacha asher lo yiten et tzavaro be'ol melech Bavel. If, and it will be, a goy v'hamamlacha, the nation and the kingdom, that will not put their neck in the yoke of the king of Bavel, okay?
What does that mean?
Sorry?
What does that mean?
It continues on to say what's going to happen to them if they don't become subjugated to Nebuchadnezzar.
So that proves that he ruled the whole world?
Yes, because it says if the...
Kings at the same time? You say
No.
all 3 ruled at the same time?
No, not 3. They couldn't be.
Yeah.
Because they rule the whole world.
Right.
So
I
Achav...
wasn't sure if it was like all 3 combined.
Achav is a Jewish king, lives right. Lives in Israel, tremendous Rasha. Nebuchadnezzar was a king in Bavel, and Achashverosh was a king in Persia. Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar, the pasuk says, and it will be that if there's a nation that does not, so to speak, bend the knee, put their head in the yoke of Nebuchadnezzar, they're going to be destroyed. Okay. See, again, a lot of times the Gemara assumes that you already know the rest of the pasuk. What's the rest of the pasuk? בחרב וברעב ובדבר אפקוד על הגוי ההוא, נאום השם עד תומי אותם בידו. I will kill them by sword and by plague and by starvation, unless they yield to Nebuchadnezzar, God says. So you see that God said there isn't a nation or a kingdom on earth that he's not going to subjugate under the rule of Nebuchadnezzar. Achashverosh, Hadamaran, Achashverosh is exactly like we've already just said, Mehodu ve'ad Kush, from one side of the world until the other. Okay, let's finish up with this last piece. The Gemara now says that there's three people that rule over the world. Siman Shasdach. Okay, what is Shasdach? The first letters of Shilomo is Shin. Samach is Sancherev, like we just said. Dalit is Daryavish. And Chaf is Koresh. So if that's the case, right, that there's only three, how could we have Shasdach that tells you that there's at least another four that also achieve the same thing? Vitu leka, you're telling me that there's no more? V'haika Shilomo. Shilomo ruled over the entire world, right? Lo salik malchuteh. The Gemara says that Shilomo, his kingdom, it was never finished, so to speak. It was something that got cut off before its end. Okay, Hanicha leman da'amar melech ve'edyot. Right? Some people learn that Shlomo HaMelech, he did not die as a king; he died as a commoner. So then you'll understand that he never finished; he couldn't complete the reign as the king. But according to the opinion, da'amar melech ve'edyot umelech, that he was a king, and then he was dethroned, and then he became the king again. So then his reign was completed. Ma'ika levemar. How are you going to explain why you didn't count Shilomo as being one of the kings that ruled over the entire world? Gemara says, Shilomo milta achriti havabe. No, you can't compare Shilomo to these other kings. Why? Shemalach al ha'elyonim al ha'tachtonim. He ruled over the upper worlds, the shamayim, but also over the lower worlds, the earth. Shne'emar, like it says, Vayeshev Shilomo. Shilomo sat al kiseh Hashem, on God's throne. Shilomo's kingdom was of a different sort completely. So you're not going to include Shilomo in a Braita that says three people ruled the world if Shilomo's dominion was bigger than the world.
But I thought the mnemonic includes Shilomo's name.
It does.
So then how can they say three people ruled the world?
Because Shilomo's fact that he ruled the world was only part of what he did. He was more than that. So it's kind of like saying, right? Imagine you say the what's it called? The winners of the Super Bowl, yeah, the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City Chiefs last year were conference champions. You're not going to say they're conference champions because they were, right? They won the Super Bowl. It's less than what they did. Shlomo HaMelech indeed ruled the Kippah, but he also ruled more than that. He also had a kingdom that extended to the upper worlds. What does this mean? He extended his kingdom to the upper worlds?
Does it mean that he didn't complete his kingdom?
That he was a melech ve'hedyot u'melech.
What does that mean?
So the story of Shlomo HaMelech we have to get to, but we're not there yet, okay? The story of Shlomo HaMelech, we're not there yet. Shlomo HaMelech was on the throne. He's tricked out of the throne.
I didn't know that.
Amazing story with Ashmedai. We're going to get to it, okay? Be'ezrat Hashem.
Why, if we're stating that these three kings ruled the world, why did they have titles with why did they say Nebuchadnezzar was king of Babylonia and Achashverosh was king of?
He was because he wasn't the king of. He was a Babylonian king who ruled the world. Achashverosh was a Persian king. It was the Persian Empire. So, as an example, the Roman Caesar, for a certain period of time, was ruling over the, not the whole world, but a huge swath of land that wasn't only Roman, but you still call him a Roman king.
This mnemonic isn't Ahab, Achashverosh, and Nebuchadnezzar.
Correct. The Gemara is now it's giving you a different mnemonic, helping you to remember other people that are also part of this conversation that seem to be getting left out.
Got it.
What's going on? Okay?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Nebuchadnezzar was the father-in-law of Achashverosh, wasn't he?
Not the father-in-law, the grandfather-in-law.
So between that time, the kingdom fell apart.
The kingdom was overtaken by the kings of
And then
Actually,
he retook it.
actually twice.
So twice.
Because he didn't have a son, right?
Sorry? What?
Who was because Vashti didn't have a. You said because Vashti didn't have a brother. They said, right? That was the end of the legacy.
Correct, but it wasn't only for that reason. Because before that happened, there was a king, a Mede king, Parasu Madai, we say, right? A Median king came in before the Persian king.
Got it.
So, as if you remember, we said earlier there was
Vashti's father.
Koresh the Mede and Daryavish the Persian, right? Actually, if I'm not mistaken, we had a chart here, do we not? Or maybe it's coming up soon.
I thought Darius was.
There are two, just like in the Persian community. There's a is it the next page? Yeah. If you turn the page for a second, you'll see it. Yeah. You see, you have Nebuchadnezzar, Bavel, Evel Merodech, Bavel. Belshazzar is the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. Who's Belshazzar's daughter?
It's Vashti.
Is Vashti. So Darius, the Mede, that's Daryavish.
Right.
So that's where it shifts from Bavel to Madai.
That's Esther's son.
Okay? Yeah.
It's Cyrus.
And they no, they haven't come yet.
Oh, that's.
So there's Daryavish. He defeats Belshazzar and takes over the king as from Madai. Then you have Koresh, okay, and that's for Persia and Media. Ahashverosh, again the same thing, and then you have Daryavish, the Persian.
Right.
So Parasu Madai is like a joint, like conquering force.
Yeah.
Similar, by the way, as an example of Anglo-Saxon. Right? The Anglo-Saxons are really two different people coming from two different places. Right? Saxony and the Anglican kingdom, if I'm not mistaken. Okay? So let's carry on. So we'll get back to Shlomo and his departure from the throne. Okay? But the Gemara says, if one answer to the question why Shlomo is not included is because he does not finish out his term. He ends his term as a commoner, so because he's dethroned, we don't count him as a king that ruled the world. Okay? The second answer is, no, saying that he ruled the world is an understatement. So therefore he's not on that list because he also ruled the upper worlds. What does that mean that he also ruled the upper worlds? The Gemara tells us that part of Shlomo's kingdom, Shlomo HaMelech, when he got his incredible wisdom, he started to learn the language, it says, of the birds, the language of the trees, the language of the demons. So Shlomo HaMelech had a tremendous power that was really almost otherworldly, and therefore we talk about it as if he was the king over the upper worlds as well. But Minan to say that it means that he was a king over God, or that he was sitting on God's throne in God's stead. Has v'shalom. That's idol worship. Sorry?
Would you say he just had access to the upper world?
He had access and some level of power there. But that power was granted to him by God.
Right.
Just like our power down here. Right.
Isn't that, you said, God forbid, they shouldn't say that?
No, I'm saying God forbid, don't say it means on the throne of Hashem instead of Hashem.
But it says he sat on the throne of Hashem.
Correct. And it means not
instead of Hashem.
Not instead of Hashem. Hashem sat him on a royal throne, so to speak, on his throne. Correct. Okay? Let's carry on. Gemara continues. The second one in the mnemonic is the Samach, which is Sancherev. Sancherev also ruled over the entire world. Amongst all the powers or gods of these lands, Asher Etzilu et Artzam Miadi was able to save their land from my hand, right? So he conquered everything. So if that's the case, how come Sancherev is not mentioned? The Gemara answers, Ha'ika Yerushalayim de lo kavsha. If you remember, we talked about Sancherev when he surrounds the city of Jerusalem. What happens? There's the song, remember we talked about this? My creations are drowning in the ocean. And the angels, you want to sing Shirah, right? We said over there, what is the alternate explanation is that the angels wanted to sing Shirah, not so they could sing a song to God, but that they wanted to kill the Egyptians using their divine siren song. Okay? And that's what happened in the story of Sancherev. Sancherev comes with innumerable troops, surrounds Jerusalem. King Chizkiyahu says to God, I can't deal with this problem. I'm going to go to sleep. Hashem, you take care of my problem. In the morning, all the soldiers surrounding are dead. What happened? The Malachim came, they sang Shirah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the soldiers died. So Sancherev, the one place he did not manage to conquer was Yerushalayim. And if that's the case, that is the blight on his attempt to rule the Kippah. The Gemara continues, Va'ika Daryavish. But we have Daryavish, the third of the mnemonic. Diktiv, like it says, Daryavish, Malka, Ketav Lechol Amamaya, Daryavish the king wrote to all of the nations, Umaya Ulishnaya, to all of the languages and the tongues, Di Dairin Bechol Ar'a Shlomchon Yazge. He said to all of those, the people in all of his lands, in every land, in all the earth, Shlomchon, like Shalom Alechem, your peace, Yazge, should become great. Okay? There should be a lot. All right? So in that expression, what we're seeing over here is that this King Daryavish is writing peace letters to the whole world, as if they're under his dominion. The Gemara says, but there's specifically 7 that he did not manage to conquer. Dichtiv Shefar Kadam Daryavish Vehekima Malchuta Le'achdar Penaya Me'ave Esrin. Daryavish was very, very excited that he ruled over 120 countries, and he put in charge of those countries he had 120 like governors. So if there's 120 governors, how many provinces are there? 120. How many were there possibly?
127.
127. His grandson Achashverosh, right? Or his antecedent, right? Antecedent. Antecedent. There you go. Right? Who is Achashverosh? This guy Achashverosh, because he's not the son of a king, so he could not be his grandson. Right? He could not be his progeny, because if he was, then what we read before is that he does not come from royal blood. So Achashverosh is just the 3rd king in the Persia media cycle. Okay? Now, the Gemara says that he ruled over 120. Later on, you find that Achashverosh rules over 127. So therefore, he's 7 short. So it refers to the whole world, but it wasn't actually the whole world. Therefore, he's not listed in the Braita. Gemara continues, Va'ika Koresh, the last of the mnemonic, there was Koresh who ruled over. Dichtiv Kol Amar Koresh Melech Paras, so did Koresh, the king of Paras, say, Kol Mamlechot Haaretz, all the kingdoms of the land, Natan li Hashem, did God give me. So if Koresh could make a statement like that God gave me all the lands, that means that he was indeed the king over all the lands. The Gemara says, Hatam, there you go, Hatam, ishtabuchehu dekamishtabach benafsheh. The guy's like, I conquered the world. Hazaku Baruch. No one really buys your own words about yourself. All these other instances were where the pasuk was describing what that person ruled over, not when the person is his own PR spreader. So therefore, we don't count Koresh's expression, and we don't take it seriously, and therefore he's not listed in the Braita. Now, just to point this out, we don't know that Koresh did not rule over 127. We also just don't know if he did rule over 127. So the question of why he's not in the Braita, because I have a pasuk that says that he did, it's just not a reliable pasuk. It's like sometimes you give a testimony in court, and the testimony is valid but illegal. Testimony, either it's hearsay or it was obtained illegally in some way which is thrown out by the court. So the point is not that we know or don't know; it's just that we have no acceptable proof. So therefore, the Braita, it could be that Koresh actually did rule over the whole world, but the answer would be that the Braita only listed ones that we knew that was the case. Okay? Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen.